This is the suitcase in which Jason Chen stuffed the 98-pound body of Jasmine Pace. That's where I'm going to begin the story. The evidence will not require that you use your imagination. Jasmine Pace was very real, and Jason Chen really killed her. Her left ankle had been shackled to her right arm. He stabbed her over and over and over again, not 7 times, not 29 times, not 43 times, but 60 stab wounds. One wound, a through and through, from the right side of the neck all the way through the left.
December 1st, 2022, Suck Creek Road, just outside Chattanooga, Tennessee. On the muddy banks of the Tennessee River, investigators made a discovery that would stop a city cold. A suitcase left out in the open, as though discarded. Inside it, wrapped in 3 black trash bags, were the remains of a young woman. 22 years old, stabbed more than 60 times. A knife blade had broken off inside her body from the sheer force of the attack. Her name was Jasmine Pace, and 10 days before she was found there, she was singing lullabies to her niece. She was caring for the 4 cats she treated like her own children. She was making plans for Thanksgiving with her family, the family that called her Jazzy. She was somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, somebody's best friend. And on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, she walked into an apartment in Chattanooga's North Shore neighborhood and never walked back out. But before she disappeared, Jasmine left behind one small digital trace, a single pin dropped on her phone in the early hours of the morning. Her family didn't see it at first, but when they did, it would change everything. Before we continue, this video covers a real and violent crime. Some details may be distressing. If that's not something you're prepared for right now, please take care of yourself first. For everyone else, viewer discretion is strongly advised. This is the story of Jasmine Jazzy Pace. Jasmine Nicole Pace was born on May 29, 2000, in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And Chattanooga was where she intended to stay. It was her city, her home, the place that shaped her. Her mother, Katrina, would later say that from the moment Jasmine came into the world, she lit up every room she entered. That wasn't just a mother talking. Everyone who knew Jasmine said some version of the same thing. There was something about her, a warmth, a steadiness, that made people feel seen. She went by Jazzy to the people closest to her, and the name fit. She was expressive, funny, and fiercely loyal. The kind of person who showed up, not just when it was easy, but every single time. Her best friend, Bailey Putman, who had known her their whole lives, said she had never once seen Jasmine afraid of anything, that she never backed down, that she was, in Bailey's own words, a safe space for everyone around her. At 22, she was a student at Chattanooga State Community College, and also helped run the office for her family's construction business. She was building something, a future she had every right to expect. But if you asked the people who loved her what made Jasmine who she really was, they wouldn't point to any of that. They'd tell you about her nieces and her godchildren, Paisley, Lily, Waylon, and how she never missed a moment with them. And they'd show you a video, filmed in 2020, of Jasmine sitting with her infant niece, singing softly to her. Her mother shared it publicly after her death, saying it was a glimpse of the real Jasmine. Once you've seen it, it's hard to forget. Her sister, Gabrielle, Gabby, was the one who showed up every time Jasmine needed someone. At the funeral, at the vigil, and eventually in a courtroom. But the words she'd save for last were the ones that mattered most. Her father, Travis, said it was a privilege just to watch her grow up. And when asked from a young age what made her most beautiful, Jasmine always gave the same answer. Her heart, now, the man who would enter her life. Jason Chen was also 22 years old, also living in Chattanooga. He was a junior at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, majoring in computer science and studying on scholarship. The son of Chinese immigrants who ran a restaurant outside Nashville. He had grown up in Nolensville, raised, as his own mother would later describe it, in a family that valued education, hard work, and doing the right thing. To people who first met him, he seemed unremarkable in the best sense. Quiet, occasionally funny. His college dormmate Ryan Barrett recalled that when they first moved in together in 2020, they got along well, like brothers even. They split rent, they shared holidays. But Barrett would later say that something shifted, that Jason became, in his words, mean, malicious, and manipulative, seemingly out of nowhere, that he would go through Barrett's things when he wasn't home, that he allegedly hacked Barrett's social media and posted content so damaging it cost Barrett his job. By the end, Barrett said he was locking his bedroom door at night, sleeping with one eye open. That was the version of Jason Chen that the people closest to him had come to know. But Jasmine Pace didn't know any of that. What she knew was that in the spring of 2022, she got a message from a guy she'd briefly matched with on a dating app months earlier. His name was Jason. He wanted to know if she'd like to go on a hike. She said yes. They walked to Rainbow Falls together. And somewhere between that afternoon and the months that followed, a trip to Chicago, 1,000 casual texts, a relationship that felt, by all accounts, easy and unhurried, Jasmine Pace let Jason Chen into her life. She trusted him. That trust would cost her everything. Tuesday, November 22nd, 2022. Jasmine Pace spent part of that evening at her mother's home. It had been a difficult day. Earlier, Katrina's grandmother, the woman who had raised her, had been rushed to the hospital. She died that night. Jasmine, who loved her family deeply and felt lost the way some people feel weather, is believed to have gone to Jason Chen's apartment, partly for that reason, for comfort, for company. Because that's what you do when grief finds you, and you trust someone. Surveillance footage from a police camera on Tremont Street captured her car pulling into his apartment complex at 11:42 p.m. That image, Jasmine's car disappearing into the parking structure, would be the last confirmed record of her alive. Phone records showed the two had spoken earlier that evening for 1 hour and 11 minutes. Whatever was said in that call, Jasmine went. She drove to the Lofts, 110 on Tremont Street, a quiet stretch of Chattanooga's North Shore neighborhood just off Fraser Avenue. She walked inside. Later that evening, a text went out from Jasmine's phone to her mother. Jasmine wouldn't be coming home for Thanksgiving. She was staying with a friend for the rest of the week. Katrina found it odd. Jasmine always came home for the holidays, especially now, especially with the family still raw from the death of the matriarch they had just lost that same night. But the text was there, in Katrina's phone. And grief has a way of making you set things aside. So she did. Then came 2:11 in the morning. A neighbor who lived in the apartment directly below Chen's was jolted out of sleep by a scream. She later testified about what she heard. Footsteps, running, from the bedroom toward the front door. A female voice. She described it as sad, emphatic, the tail end of something. Then a door slammed. 7 minutes later, at 2:18 a.m., a location pin was dropped from Jasmine's phone and sent to her mother. It landed directly on Chen's apartment. Katrina didn't see it until later. In the fog of grief and exhaustion, the notification went unnoticed. That pin was almost certainly the last thing Jasmine Pace ever sent. By the time the sun came up on November 23rd, Jason Chen was already moving. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's Ring camera recorded him leaving his apartment building multiple times, wearing a mask, one hand wrapped tightly in dark cloth. At 9:52 that morning, a message went out from his phone to a woman on Tinder. "I guess we're dating now." By 10:40 a.m., he was inside a Walmart on Signal Mountain Boulevard. Security footage caught him there, buying peroxide, a bath towel. Later that evening, he was captured on camera again at a Walgreens on Fraser Avenue, less than a mile from the apartment. More supplies. He was cleaning something up. And he was doing it methodically, calmly, as though he had time on his side. He thought he did. 4 days passed. 4 days of silence from a woman who had never gone quiet in her life. No phone calls, no voice messages, just texts, arriving from Jasmine's number, each one saying some version of the same thing: that she wanted to be alone, that she needed space, that everyone should stop worrying. None of it sounded like her. Not the words, not the tone, not the timing. Then came Saturday, November 26th. A photograph appeared on Jasmine's Facebook page. The caption read, "Enjoying Thanksgiving with my baby." At first glance, it looked like a holiday post. But her family looked closer, and everything was wrong. The photo was old. They could tell by the tattoos. Jasmine had gotten a shoulder tattoo in recent months, and it wasn't in the picture. The clothing wasn't something she'd wear. And the caption, the exclamation points, the phrasing, it just wasn't her voice. Her father, Travis, would later testify that the post was, in his words, literally a match that lit this on fire. Because anyone who knew Jasmine knew she would never have posted something like that. It wasn't modest, it wasn't recent, it wasn't her. The family moved fast. They started pulling at every thread they could find. They checked her email. The passwords had been changed. Her social media accounts locked, all of them. Someone had gone through Jasmine's entire digital life and quietly shut every door behind them. Jasmine's cousin Jacqueline White took a different approach. She went looking for that long phone call from November 22nd, the last night anyone had actually spoken to Jasmine. She ran the number through a mobile payment app to find a name attached to it. The name that came back was Jason Chen. Katrina called him. He told her he hadn't spoken to Jasmine recently. Katrina had the phone records in front of her. She pressed him on it. He paused and then said he'd forgotten. He'd forgotten a call that lasted over an hour with the woman he was dating 2 days before Thanksgiving. Then Katrina remembered something. That notification she'd almost missed. The one from the early hours of November 23rd. She went back and looked at it. It was a location pin, sent from Jasmine's phone at 2:18 in the morning. She had also used her My Chevy app to track Jasmine's phone, and everything pointed to the same place, an apartment on Tremont Street. Katrina didn't wait. She and family members went to the building and worked their way to apartment 210. When no one answered, Travis Pace opened the door with a credit card. What they found inside stopped them cold. Jasmine's overnight bag, her driver's license, her credit cards sitting on the counter, a notebook on the desk with the name Jason Chen written on it. Katrina took the ID and the cards. She would later tell the court, "I wasn't thinking about a police investigation. I was just trying to find her." A neighbor in the building confirmed it was Jason's apartment, and then offered something else, that in the early hours of November 23rd, they had heard a loud disturbance coming from inside. A scream. Katrina called 911. On November 27, 2022, Chattanooga police executed a search warrant on apartment 210 at the Lofts 110 on Tremont Street. From the outside, it didn't look like much. The apartment appeared relatively clean, tidy even. But the moment homicide investigator Zach Crawford stepped through the door, he noticed it. Underneath the surface smell of the place, something else. Cleaning products. Fresh ones. The kind you use when you're trying to get rid of something you can't afford to leave behind. Then, he started looking closer. Before they even reached for the forensic equipment, Crawford could see spots. Discolorations on the floor, on the surfaces. Stains that someone had worked hard to scrub away, but hadn't quite managed to erase. His team brought out Blue Star, a chemical reagent that reacts to the molecular trace of blood, even blood that's been cleaned, even blood that's invisible to the naked eye. They sprayed it, and the apartment lit up. The kitchen, the bathroom, the living room hardwood floor, the grout between the bathroom tiles, the bedroom carpet, the walls. Blood had soaked through the carpet and into the subflooring beneath it. The reaction, according to crime scene investigator Michelle Johnson, was unlike anything she had encountered in her career. Her exact words on the stand: "It's probably the most I've ever seen in a reaction with Blue Star on a crime scene." Crawford would later tell the jury that based on the pattern and concentration of the Blue Star results, he believed the main site of the attack was the bathroom, the tiled part, the part that would have been easiest to clean. It hadn't been easy enough. Crawford was asked by the DA at what precise moment this stopped being a missing persons case and became a homicide investigation. His answer was immediate. "Upon the first spray of Blue Star, I was in the kitchen." The apartment also told other stories. A coffee table pushed out of alignment with the couch. Broken glass, recently purchased cleaning supplies, but notably no bleach, which would have caused a false positive. Chen had been careful. He just hadn't been careful enough. Bloody items of clothing were later found in a dumpster outside the building. The trunk liner of Chen's gray Toyota Camry showed indentations, consistent, investigators said, with the pressure of a heavy suitcase. Jasmine's car, meanwhile, had already been found. It was parked at Signal View Apartments on Mountain Creek Road, miles away from Tremont Street. The driver's seat had been pushed back for someone taller than Jasmine's 5'2" frame. Someone had driven it there and left it, hoping it would look like she'd gone somewhere on her own. Surveillance footage from Chattanooga's citywide camera network told a different story. Footage captured someone believed to be Chen walking down Tremont Street carrying a suitcase, then driving Jasmine's car, then being dropped back off at his apartment by an unknown vehicle. He had been running a cover-up in plain sight of the city's own cameras. Investigators applied for a warrant for Chen's phone data. It pinged a location, his parents' home in Nolensville, Tennessee, more than an hour away. Officers went there on November 29th. They found him. Crawford later described Chen's demeanor at the arrest as calm, defensive, but calm. In his bedroom at his parents' house, investigators found handwritten notes. One was headed with the words, "The last time I saw her." It laid out a false timeline of his contact with Jasmine. Fabricated details designed to put distance between himself and what had happened in that apartment. When officers looked at his right hand, they found lacerations across the palm. Crawford testified it was consistent with what he called knife slippage. What happens when someone repeatedly uses a blade and it becomes slick. Jason Chen said nothing further. He asked for a lawyer. While Chen was in custody, investigators went back to his phone data. They pulled his location history from November 23rd, the morning after Jasmine disappeared, the morning of the Ring camera footage, the morning of the Walmart receipt. It placed him on Suck Creek Road, a winding stretch of highway just outside Chattanooga, running alongside the banks of the Tennessee River. Remote, quiet, the kind of place you go when you don't want to be seen. There was one more detail that made it worse. Jasmine had once told Jason about that road. She'd recommended he drive along it before the leaves all fell off. It was a place she found beautiful. He had remembered. On December 1st, 2022, Detective Steve Bulkley and a team of investigators searched the area along Suck Creek Road. In the brush off the roadside, partially concealed, they found a suitcase. Bulkley unzipped it. Inside was a black trash bag. He reached in with gloved hands and felt what was inside. He would later testify in the exact words that stopped a courtroom cold. I could feel what was consistent with a human head, shoulders, and a torso. Inside the suitcase were 3 black trash bags. Inside those bags were the remains of Jasmine Pace. She was handcuffed. She had no clothing on the upper half of her body. She was curled into a fetal position, and she had been stabbed 60 times. Hamilton County Medical Examiner Dr. Stephen Cogswell conducted the autopsy. He testified that the 60 wounds were concentrated in a single area of Jasmine's body. An area, he said, roughly the size of a piece of paper. The tip of the knife was still inside her. The blade had broken under the force of the attack, and whoever was holding it had kept going. A knife found on Chen's bed at the apartment was shown to the jury alongside that recovered tip. They did not match. The murder weapon was never found. Investigator Crawford, who had been present at the autopsy, was asked about the nature of the attack. His answer was short, deliberate, the kind of thing that doesn't need elaboration. It was not something that was quick, it was violent. Jasmine Pace was 22 years old. She had been dead for more than a week before anyone found her. 10 days after she was reported missing, Chattanooga learned the truth, and the city grieved. On December 10th, hundreds gathered at Coolidge Park for a candlelight vigil, the very park Jasmine had known her whole life, on the banks of the same river where her killer had left her. They held lights in the dark and said her name, Jazzy, January 13th, 2025, Hamilton County Criminal Court, Chattanooga. It had been 2 years since Jasmine Pace was last seen alive. 2 years of a city waiting, of a family carrying something that doesn't get lighter with time. And now finally, a courtroom. Because of how widely the case had been covered in the Chattanooga area, the jury had been selected from Davidson County, Nashville. 12 people who had never heard of Jasmine Pace or Jason Chen or the suitcase by the river. They were starting cold. The evidence would have to do the talking, and from the very first minute, it did. Defense attorney Josh Weiss stood before the jury in his opening statement and said he wasn't going to waste their time. He told them plainly, his client had killed Jasmine Pace. That wasn't in dispute. What was in dispute, he said, was why. The defense's argument was this. On the night of November 22nd, the couple had been drinking wine and smoking marijuana at Chen's apartment when Jasmine saw a Tinder notification on his phone. She discovered messages to other women. An argument erupted. And then, according to Weiss, Jasmine attacked Chen. First with an empty wine bottle, then with a wine glass, chasing him through the apartment. Chen, he argued, acted in the chaos of the moment. This wasn't murder, Weiss told the jury. This was voluntary manslaughter. Juror Sarah Reed would later recall that the admission itself stunned the room. Even Jasmine's family, she said, had never heard Chen's legal team concede that he'd killed her. Not like that. Not out loud, in a courtroom, on the record, in the very first minutes of the trial. The prosecution was ready. They walked the jury through everything methodically, the 60 stab wounds concentrated in an area the size of a piece of paper. The knife tip lodged inside Jasmine's body. The days-long cover-up the jury had already seen, laid out in forensic detail. The cleaning supplies, the abandoned car, the Tinder messages sent before the blood had dried. A forensic expert testified that Chen was not actively using Tinder at the time the defense claimed, dismantling the very foundation of the self-defense story. And then there were the sticky notes, found pinned to the wall of his bedroom at his parents' house. Detailed notes about Jasmine's past, her childhood, her history. Notes that prosecutors argued revealed not a man acting out of panic, but a man who had been studying the woman he was about to kill. The jury began deliberating at 4:12 in the afternoon on January 20th. They came back at 4:56. 44 minutes. Guilty. First-degree premeditated murder. Guilty. Abuse of a corpse. The next morning, the family spoke. Jasmine's cousin, Jacqueline White, brought a glass jar to the stand and dropped 60 blue marbles into it, one for each wound. She read aloud from Jasmine's own journal. She called Jason Chen a predatory sociopath, a subhuman villain, and said his last victim was his own family. Then Gabby Pace stood up. She told the jury that Jasmine had spent her life loving people who needed it, that no matter how busy, how exhausted, how heavy things got, Jasmine always made time for the people she cared about, that she had dreamed of having children of her own one day, and talked about what kind of mother she would be, that for 2 years the family had been forced to relive the last minutes of Jasmine's life over and over again. And then she said the words that closed the case as cleanly as any verdict ever could. She never gave up on people, and she never gave up on herself. Jason Chen was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He said nothing. The only words he had spoken aloud during the entire trial were "not guilty," entered at the very start, before a single piece of evidence had been shown. Jason Chen is currently serving his life sentence at the Bledsoe County Correctional Complex in Tennessee. He has not stopped fighting it. 3 days after his sentencing, his original defense team filed a motion for a new trial, arguing the verdict was contrary to the evidence and that Chen had been denied a fair trial. Among their 24 contentions, that Jasmine's family had compromised the crime scene by entering his apartment before police arrived, and that family members who were also witnesses for the state should not have been permitted to remain in the courtroom during testimony. On May 4th, 2026, Judge Boyd Patterson denied the motion. He was brief about it. The constitutional right of victims' families to be present in court, he said, had been litigated at length. His conclusions stood. Chen now has 30 days to file a formal appeal, and the case moves into the next stage of a process that legal experts say could stretch on for years. District Attorney Cody Wamp, who had led the prosecution, said after the denial that it had taken 3.5 years to close the case at the Hamilton County level, and that Jasmine's family had shown up every single time, every hearing, every court date, every appearance. She added, "I think Jasmine would have been proud to see her friends and family show up to court for her today, one last time." Katrina Bean has not been quiet. She continues to speak publicly about what her family went through. Not just to keep Jasmine's name alive, but to reach people who may be in dangerous situations of their own. She has used Jasmine's story to raise awareness about the warning signs of intimate partner violence, the kind that can be invisible until it's far too late, the kind that doesn't announce itself, because that's what this case keeps coming back to. There were no screaming arguments in the text messages, no obvious red flags in the record, just a quiet, casual relationship between two young people in the same city. A hike to Rainbow Falls, a trip to Chicago, 1,000 ordinary texts, and then a Tuesday night before Thanksgiving that none of them could have imagined. She had 4 cats she loved like her own children. She sang to her niece like the world had all the time in it, and she had an answer she gave whenever anyone asked what made her most beautiful. Not her smile, not her laugh, her heart. Everyone who loved her said she was right. They called her an old soul, the kind of person a community feels when they lose her. And Chattanooga felt it. If this story has stayed with you, if something in it felt a little too close or a little too familiar, please talk to someone. There are people who can help, and reaching out is never the wrong move. And if you're watching this for Jazzy, her family fought like hell. And so did she. That location pin she dropped at 2:18 in the morning in the last minutes of her life is the reason her killer was found. She solved her own case, as one juror put it after the verdict. Their daughter fought hard. I think her daughter solved her own murder. Rest easy, Jazzy. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. If this story meant something to you, subscribe, leave a comment, and share it. Because stories like this one deserve to be remembered. We'll see you in the next one.